Imagine standing at the crossroads of psychology and spirituality, where Western medical science meets ancient Eastern meditation practices. Can you picture it? In this space, where logic often meets contemplation, Dr. Paul Fleischman emerges as a remarkable figure, someone who didn't just straddle these worlds, but intertwined them into a powerful force of healing and transformation. His journey is nothing short of awe-inspiring. As an American psychologist and prolific writer, Dr. Fleischman's unique work has garnered respect globally. Why? Because he pioneered a deeply compassionate and holistic approach to treating patients, especially those suffering from chronic and terminal illnesses. By blending the scientific precision of psychology with the spiritual depth of Buddhist meditation, particularly Vipassana, what makes his story even more incredible is how deeply he understood that human suffering is a multidimensional experience. It's not just the body that aches, but also the heart and soul. How many of us forget this in the face of illness? Dr. Fleischman's brilliance lies in his capacity to address these layers, physical, emotional, and spiritual, in a way that brings profound peace to his patients. In doing so, he doesn't just treat their symptoms, he helps them transform their suffering into a source of meaning and inner peace. Can you imagine the sense of relief and empowerment that must bring? The beginning, a journey into meditation, but how did Dr. Fleischman come to this realization? How does one so entrenched in the scientific world of psychology find his way into the realms of ancient spiritual practices? It's a story of personal transformation, one that might resonate with anyone who's ever sought something deeper than the surface explanations that modern medicine often provides. Dr. Fleischman's introduction to Vipassana meditation was not merely an academic interest, it was life-changing. Guided by the legendary S.N. Goenka, a globally revered teacher of this ancient practice, Dr. Fleischman didn't just study Vipassana, he lived it. Vipassana, which translates to insight or clear seeing, is a meditation technique that goes beyond surface-level relaxation. It encourages a profound self-exploration, an inward journey into understanding the true nature of existence, suffering, impermanence, and the interconnectedness of all life. Imagine the kind of internal clarity and emotional equanimity such insights could bring. But here's the fascinating part: Dr. Fleischman, already a trained psychologist with a deep understanding of human emotions and behavior, found that Vipassana added an entirely new dimension to his understanding of the mind. The power of meditation wasn't just in calming the mind but in giving people direct access to their thoughts, emotions, and even physical sensations in ways that traditional therapy never could. Isn't that incredible? As he immersed himself in the practice, he realized that meditation could unlock emotional regulation, self-awareness, and, ultimately, liberation from suffering. What a profound shift that must have been, a revolutionary approach, merging psychology and meditation. Imagine being a psychologist who spends years training in the scientific method, learning to diagnose and treat mental health issues through evidence-based practices, only to discover that a centuries-old meditation technique could provide even deeper healing. That's exactly what happened to Dr. Fleischman. In Vipassana, he found not just a tool, but a way of life, a way of helping others that transcended the limitations of traditional therapy. It's worth pausing here to consider what this meant for his patients. Many of them were suffering from chronic conditions, whether it was pain, depression, anxiety, or the unbearable emotional toll of terminal illness. Traditional therapy and medication, though valuable, could only go so far. Dr. Fleischman realized this early on. He understood that while psychology could help patients manage their symptoms, it didn't always touch the deeper roots of suffering. But meditation? Meditation offered something extraordinary, the chance to observe one's thoughts and emotions without reacting to them, without letting them dominate your experience. Can you imagine what a relief that must have been for his patients? Think about it. How often do we let our thoughts and emotions run the show? Especially when we're in pain or distress, it's so easy to get caught up in negative thinking patterns, to feel trapped by our suffering. But through mindfulness, through Vipassana, Dr. Fleischman's patients learned to watch their pain, their fears, their frustrations with a sense of detachment. And in that space between observation and reaction, they found peace. Isn't that powerful, the transformative power of mindfulness in chronic illness? Now, let's delve deeper into how this works, especially for those dealing with chronic illness. Imagine waking up every day in pain, physical, emotional, or both. It's exhausting, isn't it? Chronic conditions can feel like an endless loop of suffering. Many patients feel trapped, not just by their illness, but by the emotional toll it takes on them. Negative thoughts like "why me?" or "will this ever end?" can become overwhelming, leaving patients feeling hopeless. How many times have we heard stories of people whose entire lives become consumed by their illness? This is where Dr. Fleischman's approach made such a radical difference. Through Vipassana, patients learned that they didn't have to let their pain define them. Meditation taught them how to observe their pain without judgment, without emotional attachment. What an incredible shift that must have been for those who felt at the mercy of their suffering. Dr. Fleischman helped them see that while pain is inevitable, it doesn't have to dominate their lives. Doesn't that offer such a liberating perspective? For patients with chronic conditions like anxiety, depression, or chronic pain, this approach was a game changer. Meditation gave them the tools to manage their thoughts and emotions in real time, empowering them to experience life in a fuller, more balanced way. Imagine being able to face your pain and say, "Yes, you're here, but you don't control me." That's what Dr. Fleischman's patients learned, and for many, it was nothing short of transformative, holistic healing. When acceptance is the key, let's reflect for a moment on how powerful acceptance can be. In today's world, we're often told to fight against our challenges, to battle our illnesses as if they are enemies. But Dr. Fleischman showed his patients a different path, a path that embraced acceptance, not as resignation, but as a way of working with life as it is. Isn't that a radical yet profoundly compassionate approach? For patients dealing with chronic illnesses, this shift in perspective was monumental. Rather than seeing their illness as something to be defeated, they began to view it as part of their life experience, something they could accept and live with peacefully. And through meditation, they learned to stay grounded in the present moment. After all, isn't it often our thoughts about the future, about what might happen, that cause us the most anxiety? Dr. Fleischman's patients learned to live in the now, focusing on the present rather than catastrophizing about the future. What a gift that must have been. Can you imagine the relief of letting go of that constant worry about what's to come? In embracing the present moment, they found a sense of peace that had eluded them for so long. Pain as a teacher, reframing physical and emotional suffering. And what about pain? So many of us are conditioned to resist it, to fight against it with everything we have. But Dr. Fleischman's approach was different. He taught his patients that pain could be a teacher. Isn't that a remarkable idea? Through mindfulness, his patients learned to separate the physical sensation of pain from the emotional reactions of fear, anger, or frustration. Can you imagine how powerful that must have been for someone living with chronic pain? By observing their pain without getting lost in negative emotions, patients found that they could reduce the intensity of their suffering. Over time, they began to experience their pain in a new way, not as something to be feared or fought against, but as a natural part of their experience. And isn't that what makes Dr. Fleischman's approach so unique? It's not about eliminating pain or suffering, but about changing our relationship with it. His work in this area was revolutionary, even before scientific studies began to show the efficacy of mindfulness-based interventions in reducing the perception of pain. In many ways, Dr. Fleischman was ahead of his time, pioneering a practice that would later become a cornerstone of holistic healthcare. Isn't it fascinating how one person's vision can ripple out to change the world? Facing mortality with grace, meditation in end-of-life care. Now, let's explore one of the most profound aspects of Dr. Fleischman's work, his application of meditation in end-of-life care. Death is, perhaps, the ultimate source of fear and anxiety for most of us. How do you even begin to address the emotional and spiritual suffering that accompanies the knowledge of one's impending death? It's an overwhelming question, isn't it? But here's where Dr. Fleischman's understanding of Buddhist philosophy and Vipassana meditation offered something truly unique. Central to Buddhist teachings is the concept of impermanence, the understanding that everything, including life itself, is in a constant state of change. For many of his terminally ill patients, this concept became a source of peace rather than fear. Through meditation, Dr. Fleischman taught his patients to observe their emotions, fear, grief, anxiety, without becoming overwhelmed by them. Isn't that incredible? Facing death, these patients learn to watch their feelings arise and pass away, just as all things do. Can you imagine the sense of calm that must have brought? Instead of being consumed by their fear, they could step back, observe it, and find peace in the process. But it wasn't just about managing emotions. Dr. Fleischman also emphasized the importance of compassion, for oneself and for others. As his patients came to terms with their mortality, meditation helped them cultivate compassion for their suffering and that of those around them. How beautiful is that? In a time when many might feel isolated or overwhelmed, Dr. Fleischman helped his patients connect deeply with their own humanity and with the people in their lives.